Finally, on the other hand, this big question. If you run for public office, what does that mean? If you're in public office, or even if you're appointed or elected to a judgeship as a member of government, what does that mean? What you do while that's in government, who does that belong to? Is our country so broke because our politicians have wasted our time in political capital? And so, if that's not the case, then what is this contrivance? The things that are done while in public service are for the public. They're for the people. It's one of those things you have to commit to when you run for public office. It's one of those things that happens. It's one of the reasons your life is scrutinized. It's one of the reasons you're supposed to fill out ethics forms. It's one of the reasons that if something happened in the past, you have to be able to explain it or account for it. So, with that said, I wrote a report on July 11th and 12th. I actually published it on July 11th and 12th. And the original intent was to follow up on an audit that was 40 years old. Its 40th anniversary was happening July 11th of 2020. It was an audit of the Department of Energy. And it was specifically regarding workers' safety at uranium enrichment plants. It doesn't really get any more high risk than that. And I don't think there's really any greater accountability that needs to be assumed than when you're in a position to have to deal with those matters. And what's happened is, especially because we live in a country that allows for nuclear energy to provide our energy needs, somebody seems to think that it is okay to expect the people that are the end users or the people that are getting electricity to provide the enrichment. And in the last couple of years, we've been told we're not even entitled to highly enriched. We need to go low enriched. But they don't explain to us what this means. And they don't explain to us what is supposed to be necessitated in these matters. And in the process, we have a more than 40-year now audit of the Department of Energy, where the Office of the Comptroller of Currency told the Department of Energy what you're doing is irresponsible. And it's important to know the person who requested this audit was an astronaut who became a senator. Who else would you expect to have the credibility to say, my constituents told me they had some concerns. I looked into it. I need you to go check this out. It's been 40 years. And they have not addressed the very relevant and cogent concerns that were presented by the Office of Comptroller around irresponsibility by opportunists involved with the Department of Energy manipulating energy policy in order to engage in financial fraud. Financial fraud that they think they're entitled to use to engage security matters, including security matters in our homes and leveraging whatever we do in our homes if and when we have one. It's unacceptable. But during that time frame when I was writing the report and having it published, I also did some concurrent research on the history of the banking system. And I found some things that day. It was 2:37 a.m. Central Standard Time on July 12th, 2020. There is a document from the past of American currency and banking. It's called the Joint Resolution to Suspend the Gold Standard and Abrogate the Gold Clause. It's from June 5th of 1933. And Section 2, Paragraph 1 of Subsection B of Section 43 of the Act, which was approved on May 12th of 1933, and the next part was approved on June 5th. The final act was approved on June 5th of 1933. Why did they suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause? It's worth reading. If you can find those documents, read it. The concerns around what it meant to have our currency backed by something like gold or silver was very important. It's a very intense wealth of information that we could possibly have in this country that would be very relevant for dealing with right now. But it also talks about very, very significant concerns around extractivism and around potential derivation, but also the concept of what are the things we consider of value that translate both domestically and internationally. This was a big deal, but it also references something that happened shortly after the Banking Act of June 16th in 1933. And on this day, what was going on concurrent was me understanding that there was something very important about Section 6A. The second paragraph of Section 10 of the Federal Reserve Act, as amended USC Title 12, Section 242, is amended to read as follows: the Secretary of the Treasury and the Comptroller of the Currency shall be ineligible during the time they are in office and for 2 years thereafter to hold any office, position, or employment in any member bank. The appointed members of the Federal Reserve Board shall be ineligible during the time they are in office and for 2 years thereafter to hold any office, position, or employment in any member bank, except that this restriction shall not apply to a member who has served the full term for which he was appointed. Now, there's more, but this is very important to acknowledge because that day I was writing and finishing a report that had a very important benchmark date for July 12th. And one of the things it had to address was the fact that the Department of Concern in the last several years has engaged in some very questionable activity in terms of adhering to appropriate standards concerning the functions of that department, but also specifically connected to an executive order that, as far as I know, is still active, that says anybody who serves in a cabinet position is precluded from any lobbying for 2 years following their leave from that cabinet position. The question then becomes one of, well, what is the president doing with his cabinet appointees? Is he minting them? And so, what does it mean if somebody gets fired without just cause? What does it mean if somebody retires early because they're experiencing some kind of obstruction? This is the political capital of the people that has been allowed to participate in our governance. And is this a situation where the President of the United States, and without the intercession of Congress to forestall him thus far, is engaging in a process of expropriating the people's wealth via our representatives of government and our civil service employees so that it can be used for coinage or currency? See, technically, the president doesn't have the right or the authority to coin and mint. But at the same time, if the president is doing this, what is Congress doing? And I contend that right now there are actions. There's been at least 2 coinage laws that have been passed by senators and the Congress in the last year. One of them is current right now, that they have allotted this time frame as a period during which there will be issuance of a certain kind of coinage based on the legacies of George and Barbara Bush. I contend it's illegal coinage literally, but it is reflective of and demonstrative of another form, another kind of currency fixing that has been going on. And so the big question is right now, not only does there need to be an assessment of under what authority are these things that are being printed in the Federal Register set for tomorrow supposed to be happening, but is the president, and by virtue of Congress's refusal to check him, the Congress of the United States, engaged in a process of illegally expropriating people's personal private capital, or the or the political capital of the people, as it is reflected in our public servants, for a illegal coinage scheme in lieu of us having an appropriate budget. I think that this has to be attended to because it may explain why it is that the president signed those 3 memos and that one executive order. And while people wanted to hem and haw for public notices in the media, Congress still went on recess. I'm not on recess.